Hello, everyone. I am Gigi Howard. I am so glad to be partnering again with my friends at EveryLibrary, the only political action committee for libraries. And my podcast is Drinks in the Library, where every week I interview someone and we pair their favorite book with a drink. So I hope you catch us there. Now, this week and this month is National Audiobook Month. And so EveryLibrary and I are so happy to be here to celebrate authors and voice artists discussing the social impact of storytelling and the culture of reading and writing in America today. So I am very pleased to be joined today with Mary Jane Wells. Mary Jane, hi, welcome in.
Well, hello.
Hello. So today we'll be discussing the social impact of storytelling, and I just do a little intro for you. You are trained at the Royal Conservatoire of Scotland, and you're known for your solo show, Heroine, which tells the story of a military sexual trauma survivor. Narrated over 50 audiobooks and received multiple awards for your work. The Authors Republic published and distributed the audiobook version of Heroin, and it is an Audie Award winner. And so thank you so much for joining us today, Mary Jane. Do you want to start with telling us a little bit about what is Heroin? What is that story about?
Oh, gosh, it's a big one. Well, first of all, thanks for having me on, and also for this story, which was written now 15 years ago, believe it or not. I met with somebody who is a survivor of military sexual trauma, and she was at that point in her healing trajectory where she had been silent about it. And I think women of her particular age in the military, silence is still the safest place for them. But she was at a point where it was sort of coming out of her like lava, and she was telling everybody, this is what happened to me, in a kind of reconciliation with her own soul. And I happened to be somebody who was nearby. I didn't really know her very well, but I was very intrigued, and we started to become friends. And she and her friend had they were on set because they were going to approach me about doing a small part in a film that they were doing together. And that never really came to pass. But we, over a long period of time, just nutshelling this for you, over a long period of time, I basically adapted her story, bought the life rights off her, adapted the story for stage, and it became something which was just a huge part of my life for 10 years. Because her story is really one of redemption and forgiveness, and what forgiveness is, and tries to interrogate whether it's really necessary to forgive that kind of act, and how you can, and your best revenge is really living your fullest life.
Thank you for that. And I have a review here of Heroin that I'd like to read. Heroin is a prime example of raw, honest theater. It is a profound amalgam of anger, outrage, fragility, and survival. Rather than an extensive discussion of the sexual assault that Davis, our soldier, experienced, there is a lacerating depiction of the event, hushing what feels like the world for a few minutes, as well as dedication and respect for the role speaks volumes. A harrowing piece of beautiful theater, distressingly lyrical, but despite its subject matter, it's funny, touching, engaging, and in some morbid sense, comforting. A story we need to hear, a story we must preserve. So, and that was after a review that came out after your show at the Kennedy Center. So the show, it started in Scotland, correct? And then what was it like, to kind of grow it and to see it, the trajectory of it?
Oh, thanks for asking. Well, it was a very long trajectory because everybody said no for a long time. And here in Scotland, I'm just always grateful for the fact that Creative Scotland and certain producers here said, this is a really important story. And there was nothing particularly self-seeking at all, because it's never going to be a commercial hit, a show like this. It's going to really pull a very particular audience, and it's not going to make loads of money, ever. So they supported it from the start in a kind of series of what we call R&D, research and development, where we did 3 or 4 of those, where we went, is this a solo show? Could this be done like this? Could this be done like this? And we only had, in fact, we didn't have any funding, but we had a theatre that said, you can put this on, we'll help you develop it, but just do a work in progress. And we went, we don't know if we're ever going to get to put this on, because it's such tough subject matter, and we want to see how audiences react. So in 2017, and I'd written it in 2011, this amazing theatre called Capitol Theatres here put it on, and we just went for it in a week. I rehearsed it in a garden shed for a month. And then a lighting designer said, I'll light it for a bottle of whiskey. And my friend Matt Padden was head of sound at the National. My friend John Wilkie's the production manager. My friend Susan's the director. And they all jumped in, and we got it on its feet in 4 days. And we performed it. I performed it with them in front of a group of students. And so we had ticket-paying audiences, even though it was really just, I'm not going to say thrown together. We just pulled it out of the bag. And we got 100 letters backstage after that period.
Wow.
And I think we had played to 200 people, which is, so we knew we were onto something. And one of them said, it still breaks me up actually. One of them said, this play, this is not about blowing my own trumpet, but this is about how it intersects with people and a certain demographic. He said, this play gives me hope for what I went through. And I thought, good, because it cannot be any other way with a topic like this.
Mm-hmm.
So from that, I think we had some momentum behind us, and we went to the Fringe. And when we were at the Fringe, I cornered the Kennedy Center, who happened to be there that year, and said, you have to come and see this, because all your veterans benefits are getting cut, and they're a massive part of your audience. And so I sort of forced them into it. I sent them a ticket and a photograph of where it was. I kind of led them to it with little Hansel and Gretel breadcrumbs, and they saw it. And then I didn't hear anything for months. I think about 3 months went by, and I was like, okay. And then I got this email going, we want to debut you. Here's the money. Can you come in 2 years' time? And I was like, this is the wildest dream. Doing it in the Kennedy Center was just such a perfect place for it. But also the real life person about whom this is her story. It's very difficult to do it in America. It was at a very great distance, and a proper optimal distance for how it needed to be for her. But because it had taken so long to develop, she was at a point in her healing which perfectly entwined with where the play was at that point. At the Fringe, she was able to watch it through Skype, so she could walk away for the bits that are too triggering. And so she would get a round of applause sometimes when the audience, I would say, and there's our anonymized survivor, she's watching it through Skype. But she secretly sat in the Kennedy Center audience every night in person to hear that round of applause, which blows me away. And the whole thing still feels like a wild dream that I don't quite know how it happened, but the heavens really smiled on it. So I'm happy that the subject went out there on that platform in that way for those people. And it still, it still provokes interest now, which is amazing. It's amazing for the momentum of Me Too, the sea change that it was, and the fact it's ongoing.
Yeah. I think that's really beautiful that this story started with her and with you, and then it progressed, and then part of her healing was also to see portrayal up on that stage with you. So it's really moving. Yeah. And then also, I know you said there's other survivors of sexual assault that you've heard from, and also members of the Department of Defense and the Pentagon, I know, came to see it as well. Have you heard from more of veterans and the impact of your work on them?
Oh, yeah. We performed in Washington in 2020. And there was 2 soldiers who'd come from Gitmo, Guantanamo Bay, they were sat at the front, who will remain nameless. But after that period, I had already written the TV show of Heroine, thinking this would be amazing if we can anonymize Dana. I mean, we've anonymized her for 8 years. I wonder if we can still do that. How do we do that at such a level? And it was sort of changing to try and adapt to that question when the body of Vanessa Guillen went missing in April 2020. And it wasn't found. She wasn't found until June, excuse me. And I don't know if you're aware of the case around that, but I was very moved to write about this young woman because she became, in some ways, a terrible martyr for the fact that the bodies of those who are assaulted in the military go missing all the time. And there is such an enormous lack of accountability across each branch of the service. And at that point in particular, there was a huge inquiry into Fort Hood because she had, I'm sorry, trigger warning, by the way, for everybody who's watching. She had reported that she was being sexually assaulted and she was murdered in the broad light of day on her base, which for a civilian is the same as being killed in your office next to the photocopier. So I looked more into Fort Hood, and there's a lot more out there since, but since then there has been huge legislative changes, maybe not quite enough for most people who are still serving or active duty or veteran, or any of us in the world really, but there has been huge changes because of that. And I sort of think she was also part of a sea change of a number of people who were like George Floyd, who became spearheaded a kind of championing of change during that period. So yes, I heard from a lot of other survivors because I also over-researched the subject and gave myself secondary trauma and had to put the whole subject down for a year while I healed myself. So when I synthesize their stories now, I'm much, much more careful about how I take them in and how I write about that kind of thing. But I've written a TV show called Soldier, which features that as one of the storylines. I'm interested in looking at the intersection between gender and that kind of, and sexual trauma. So I want to look, I'll always be interested in telling military stories in the right way, as long as I'm invited, you know.
Yeah. And going to telling the story, what is the experience like? And you already spoke to the writing and the over researching it and how that impacted you. What is experiencing performing it on stage? It's so, you know, it's such an emotional depiction, but there's also humorous bits as well.
It's probably time to bring in the drinks, isn't it? We've been talking about really difficult things, but I did want to say, you meant real drinks, right?
Yes, yeah.
In all of this dark situation, it's probably time for a gallon of wine.
Yes, I agreed.
Right.
Cheers.
Cheers. Yeah, it is. Well, it's very lucky to get, I mean, I don't want to, you know, boring my process, but it is lucky to get to perform these days with, especially post-COVID, they just haven't quite recovered from that. Things are still a bit thin. So I'm lucky in that most of the time I'm a voiceover artist. So I earn my money from that and create my work in the pace that it needs to be created. So I kind of go on stage when I've created something. Probably, I don't know if anybody had cast me apart from me. So yeah, when I go on stage doing a solo show like that, it's part of a kind of sausage factory in a way of solo show to entirely research the territory, audiobook, audio drama, TV show. And it takes years and years and years to make sure that happens. And yeah, I'm really enjoying, I really enjoy that bit, and it just doesn't happen enough. And I'm sure that most actors would say that, you know, you can dig and dig and dig and dig, creating this sandcastle, and then it's only there for a week and then it goes away. But yeah, did that answer your question?
Oh yeah, thank you. And I did want to also bring up, obviously, you are a big audio actor and voiceover and narrator. So how does one get into that line of work?
Oh gosh. Well, you know, going into voiceover from acting is a great way to get in, because you are already used to the fact that there's hardly any work. So when you go into voiceover, it is in some ways, you know, the steady husband, to the bad boyfriend of on-camera and theatre work. So how would I get in? Are you thinking this question really should be tweaked to people who are looking to do the same?
Oh, I was more interested in your experience of, like, you said you were an actor and then you got into it from there. And I mean, was there surprises along the way?
I suppose I got into voiceover really not because I was some enormously successful actor in TV. I went to LA to do TV and did some of the worst television you've never seen. So going into voiceover was just like, I've got to do something. I've got to do something now I'm here. And LA is not a theatre town. So I have to do something creative, or otherwise this big grand adventure to come to the States is over. So when I moved into voiceover, it was really out of desperation, honestly. And then it took off. And then I was like, wait, I'm economically stable for the first time in years.
Mm-hmm.
And this means that I can afford to stay in the business long enough to see those jobs happen in the way I want to see them happen, rather than in a way that other people would want to see them happen. So yeah, voiceover is probably overlooked by a lot of actors. I don't know why. Maybe there's a little bit of snobbery about it, because a lot of the time you're doing commercials like, buy these jeans, eat this cheese. And you're like, wow, this is my goneril, because you've done all this training and you're like, But don't get me wrong, I'm really happy to say, buy this cheese, wear these jeans. But yeah, but the stuff that is, I suppose, done for different audiences, done for different reasons, more artistically invested in, it means I have more control over that. And that's not usually a word that's used in this profession very often.
And when we're talking about control and how do you select what audiobooks that you narrate or that productions that you're involved in?
I have a very clear filtering system. I basically say, is there anything depicted in here which doesn't really depict consent very well? Because for some reason, my voice goes well with historical romance. So occasionally there's some spicy scenes.
Love
And
that.
so in these scenes as well, I just want to be part of a world that is sex positive and mirrors consent. But there are dark corners of this world, and I don't mean to judge them. Some people like to read consenting, non-consensual romance. And I have a strong opinion about that. Maybe I should be shot down. But I screen those out because they're not for me. But I also am interested in this line between what on earth is non-consensual romance? Is it a healthy exploration of shadow, or is it just rape culture getting in underneath the barrier? Like, I think we're still a culture that doesn't understand the difference between submission and consent, which worries me. So basically, if it's healthy, I don't care what you do. If both those characters are into it, great. But if it even sniffs at misogyny, and I think I probably have, mistakenly, I've probably changed my mind about what that is over the last 10 years. Then I'll filter out the ones that I'm just not interested in and I don't care about.
So, well, thank you for sharing that. I did want to ask, thinking about your career and all your experiences, if you could go back to, I guess, when you were starting your acting career, what's something you would say, what's a hint you would give your younger self about what to expect?
Oh, you're the master of your own ship. Because when you're starting out, you think, what's the trajectory? Okay, it is get training, get an agent, get those jobs. And I tried that and it didn't work, so I went to another country. And then I looked back and went, no, I should just have created content which would have attracted an agent, and then I could choose which agent I want. And then I'd be set up a bit more. And solo shows were very clear, and it was a last-ditch attempt for the very first solo show I did before Heroin to go, is anybody interested? So I'd say you are the master of your own ship. So create it yourself. You're a creative person, so redefine the paradigm. Don't think that that's the only way to do it because everybody else is.
Wonderful. Thank you. I did want to, this is, I'm working with EveryLibrary, and I have a library focused podcast, and I am a librarian. So I was curious if you had any experiences with libraries that, you'd like to share with us today.
Oh, yeah. My mum is a big believer in libraries, and I think they're fantastic. So I'm glad you exist.
Thank you. Yes. And well, on that same line, when you're just reading on your own, what do you enjoy reading?
Oh, I'm a massive military nerd.
Okay.
I'm reading Sisters in Arms, which is a brilliant book written by a British author. Oh my God, I've forgotten her name. But anyway, it details the history of military women because I'm reading some of these books because I need to make sure I know what I'm doing when I'm writing about stuff. But it details all the women who bound their breasts and who served way back, there's things called kurgans in the Ukraine. They're mass graves, or not mass graves in the way that we might think of them, but mass graves are people who were wounded in battle. But when they exhumed those skeletons, they found that they were female and they were buried with their weapons. So women have been fighting and on the front lines for way longer than they've had any credit for. And also there was some missive about women and pigeons on a Royal Naval boat, I think in the 1700s. So they ran away from home to escape poor conditions. They wanted better wages. They wanted to leave an abusive husband, bound their breasts, passed as a man, and served in tons of wars. So I think she's done a beautiful job with this book. It's really well researched. And if only I could remember her name, I would give her proper credit. But it's called Sisters in Arms. And it's the kind of thing I'm reading at the moment.
Okay. And also, so at the moment and then going forward, I know you talked about Soldier. What are you working on right now, and what can we expect from, where can we find you?
Thank you. I guess Instagram is a good place to find me. If excuse me, hold on one second.
Yeah, me too.
If you're thinking audiobooks, it would be at Mary Jane Wells Stories on Instagram. If it's for anything else, usually my website is usually a good place to find me. I'm doing two things at the moment. One is a show called The Good Girl, which ostensibly is set in the world suggested by dementia. I cared for my dad for 3 years while he passed from this disease. And we originally started developing the show with him before he lost capacity and it was no longer in integrity. So it's a show, and we have thought partners as the Kennedy Center are in, and also Authors Republic are in, which is great. And we just got the money about 2 hours ago to write the script and like a commission, basically. So I'm writing.
Congratulations.
Thank you. So there's that one, and there's Soldier, which is just about to be pitched as a TV show finally. So we'll see what happens with that.
How long, I'm just kind of curious now that you brought it up, like what is the time between like a pitch and finding out you've got the show or you've got the money? I mean, how long, what is that process like?
It's nuts. It kind of doesn't exist. When I say master of your own ship, it's like, you better make it up because nobody knows. Now, I'm fairly new to television, really. In fact, totally new. So I don't know what's going to happen when I pitch this show. I don't know. I've been working with a first look deal producer for 3 years, but sadly she passed in February. So we're just making it up. It's me and my agent going, what do you think? With regard to the other show, that's it's in its initial first stage, which is a solo show. That's had 2 rounds of development. And typically when you put in for the money for that, it's about, depending on how much you ask for, it's about 3 months after that they say, yes, you have, or no, you haven't. So this next bit is, yes, you have, and we are commissioning you to sit and write the script somewhere to be paid properly to do that.
Well, I want to wish you the best of luck on these upcoming projects and say thank you so much for
Thank
sitting.
you.
Yeah. sitting down with us today, and encouraging us all to be the master of our own ship. So wonderful. And then we'll just sign off with the cheers.
Thank you. Always good to find somebody else wearing exactly the same shade of green. Thanks, Gigi.
Love it. Love it. Thank you,
Thanks
Mary
for
Jane.
having me.
Cheers. Bye.
Bye.